Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome into your Celtics source on this Monday evening. The Celtics don't play. There's a couple of games going on around the league, but I thought this would be a great time just to take my Celtics hat off. And yes, I'm still wearing a Celtics hat, but look at the NBA as a whole and not just the Celtics, because I spend most of the time looking at the Celtics. But let's be realistic. The Celtics are not a top team in the league right now. The Celtics are, in that gap year. And so I think it's great that we take a step back and look at the entire league and some of the other storylines coming around the league, whether it be good storylines, bad storylines, stuff we're all going to talk about tonight. But things that sometimes I miss or I don't get to talk about when I'm just talking about the Celtics, right? And I cover the Celtics, but I really like talking about the NBA as a whole. And there's so many different moments and games that I don't get to watch because I'm watching a Celtics game. And so it's nice on a day off like today to look at some of the games. I went back and watched a couple of games from Sunday night, and there were a lot of good games. And we're going to talk actually about a lot of those games in the second half of the show. Actually, we're going to go in depth into almost all of the games that happened. But I want to start with just some of the bigger themes around the league. But before we get started, please subscribe, like this video, share it with others. It really helps me continue to keep putting on shows like this. Weekly, we do podcast episodes on the Celtics, and those you can watch on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, so make sure to check those out. But without further ado, let's get into this game. Or, I guess, these themes from around the league. And I want to start with the Ja Morant situation in Memphis, because it's getting a little too loud there in Memphis, right? I think Ja Morant wants out of Memphis, that's for sure. I think if Memphis could, they would, they want to get rid of Ja Morant as well. Just, these ongoing disciplinary issues that are going on. He's already had the suspensions for, that gun situation and, just being a bad teammate, in the clubhouse, right? He's also, had a couple injuries, right? I think it was the 2023 season where he was out almost the entire season with that, the serving his gun suspension, and then he comes back and tears his shoulder and is then out for the rest of the season with that injury, right? So the combination of the disciplinary and the injuries, make him a pretty bad fit right now, especially in Memphis, which, can be known for, rowdiness. I'm not saying the team, but as the city, right, it's known for, being a little violent sometimes. Just a spot, a terrible, location for a player that already has maybe some, quote-unquote mental issues. Just a terrible spot to put a guy like that in, right? He goes to another team. I actually do think he can turn his career around. I'm not saying he's done, but at this point, what team really wants him, right? He's always injured. He, is having a rough year in terms of efficiency. He's not a top guard in the league for sure anymore. And, I think he can be good on both ends of the floor, but right now he's just not. And so I'm not sure what you do if you're Memphis. They haven't signed a contract for him. You could just let him walk, but at that point you're starting up from scratch. You're rebuilding around a team, a lottery pick, which they're going to be in the lottery this year, I believe. But we don't know, if they'll win the lottery per se, and because, the odds are now so narrow, really any team can win. Conversation for a different time. I'm not a fan of the lottery. I wish, the NBA was okay with teams just tanking and getting that first pick. I really think, like, you look at a team like the Wizards, the Jazz, the Nets, always bottom teams over the last couple of years, and they just haven't been able to get a top pick because of how these, just, picking a number out of a hat, right? That's how Dallas got Cooper Flagg. And we'll talk about Dallas because Dallas is a whole different situation going on right there. But yeah, that's really all I have to say on the Memphis Grizzlies. I think, they are going to want out, or at least Memphis is trying to get rid of John Morant. John Morant, I think, wants out of Memphis. So really, it's a mutual way. You're just waiting for another team to, want him, which at the moment, I don't think you have a team that is interested in a guy like John Morant. All right, moving on. The Detroit Pistons are on a 9-game win streak. They beat Philly the other day without Cade Cunningham. JB Bickerstaff is my, coach of the year, my favorite right now. You have, multiple rookies or young players, guys like Dennis Jenkins. He looks legit. You have, I really think the Pistons are a top team in the league right now, top 2 team. I think I have them right behind the Thunder. And they're doing it with or without Cade Cunningham, right? Obviously, Cade Cunningham is just putting up monster numbers when he's on the court. I think he's probably, he's playing right now, probably the best basketball we've ever seen from him. He's carrying a team that, I'm not going to say they're trash without him because they're winning all these games without him, but he's just bringing this team from, maybe a 4 or 5 wins above 500 to a 10 games above 500 team right now. It's just incredible to watch. And they're right behind the Thunder. And, the Thunder, they're better than they were last year. Like, I know it's hard to say it. They broke records last season by, I think, getting a 12 point net rating, right? Positive 12, the best point differential of all time. And this year, they're beating teams by 15. And they're doing it without Jalen Williams. Right? Jalen Williams hasn't even played a game. I don't even know when he's coming back. But, the fact that this team is winning without Jalen Williams, I don't even know if there's a team in the NBA that's going to win a game against the Oklahoma City Thunders in the playoffs, let alone a series. It's just incredible, right? I have this team winning 70 games right now, and I know, there's been talk of whether they're going to try and go for a record. You play it by year. If you're around there, if you're around 70 wins with, games to go, yeah, I try and go for the record. And we don't know, right? Injuries could, I'm not going to say they're going to derail the season, but it could stop them of reaching a 70-win mark, right? I don't think there's any injury short of, SGA and Jalen Williams being down that take this team out of the playoffs, right? It's just overwhelming for teams right now. And it's nice to see that teams like the Pistons, the Rockets are, at least playing well and in championship contention. Because if it was just the Thunder, there wouldn't really be a point of watching this season because we would know who was going to win right from the start of the season. And yes, I don't think there's anyone in their right mind that's not going to pick the Thunder, if they're playing like this. But it's nice to know that it, maybe it is possible for the Rockets, the Pistons, the Nuggets, some of these top teams, the Lakers, to make it an interesting game, if not series. Unfortunately, most of these teams are in the West, which, makes a great Western playoff run. But the East, it's pretty weak. That's why, I don't want to make this about the Celtics. But, that's why the Celtics can sneak in here and even a 6th spot. And I know they're only at 500 right now, but they played the Nets twice. Pistons, that's going to be a big game right before Thanksgiving. Magic, they can get above 500 or, like a couple games above 500 and stay above 500. They can easily find themselves at Christmas time, in an actual playoff spot. Just how bad the East is. But, we talked about the Thunder. We talked about the Pistons. We talked about John Morant. I've talked a little bit about it. I want to talk a little bit more about the Cooper Flagg situation and just the way it's going in Dallas. I think, just with the injuries of Kyrie and Anthony Davis and the fact that Cooper Flagg is playing point guard at 18, yeah, he's probably not going to drive winning just because you don't see many 18-year-olds, driving winning. He's putting up numbers close to what LeBron is, or what LeBron did in his, in his rookie years. Right, they're actually very similar players in terms of their play style, and just how they play the game. But like LeBron and the Cavs, right? They are a pretty impoverished franchise right now in terms of the talent that they have around them, especially with Anthony Davis and Kyrie out for who knows how long. Right, and so I think you really want to find any way you can to trade a Anthony Davis and a Kyrie Irving, and I don't know how many teams are going to want those two players given their injury history, but I think you want to start from scratch and build up around Cooper Flagg, right? Find a point guard that can play with him so you can get him off the ball, which is where he will thrive the best. But nonetheless, playing up him point guard in his rookie year is only it's only going to help him, right? Because it gets him better on the ball. It gets him better at making plays for others and being that facilitator, which you're going to have to be if you're a star in this league and you're getting doubled and, teams are, forcing you to give the ball up. But at some point, you have to switch him over into his main role so he can, help this team win, right? Because Cooper Flagg playing at point guard, in his early 20s is not going to help you win. But yeah, moving on, before we talk about some of the individual games tonight, let's talk about the Suns. I want to talk about the Hawks as well. The Kings, they're an interesting team with their struggles as well, and maybe some of the guys that they're going to trade. The Knicks and Cavs are two teams that we thought were going to be top teams in the East, if not the league, and they've had their struggles. But let's start with Houston Rockets. Later, I actually have a stat on Cooper Flagg, but the Houston Rockets, last year, they were a great defense, but they struggled in crunch time games and down the stretch because they just didn't have that number one offensive guy, that go-to guy that they can, that could, make a winning play or win them a game, in fact, right? This year, I don't know what you say. Kevin Durant, his impact is just at an unbelievable level, right? Like, in terms of MVP conversation, KD's not putting up quite the same numbers as some of the guys like Jokic, Luka, and who am I thinking? Giannis, Shea, right? All those guys that are putting up numbers in the 30s. But when you think about what this team would be without Kevin Durant, I think you have to put Kevin Durant in that MVP conversation, right? He's having 26 points per game, right, on 51% from the field, 41 from three, almost 90% on free throws, right? His highly contested shot diet, that's what he does, that mid-range shot, right? He's still unstoppable at, 37, 38? I don't know how old he is, but he looks like he could be playing, maybe he's even 39. I'm not even sure on his age. But it just looks like he has no, slowing down. And the defense is hit or miss. But at, what is he, 6'11"? Yeah, you're going to be impacting plays defensively anyway. He has his 174th 35-5 game, which ties Russell Westbrook the other night. I think he still wants to play in the 2028 Olympics, which, is a couple years out. But, even if you're not playing in the NBA, I still think you put him on the team just because of what he's done for just the sport of basketball. Right, and he'll be a great role model to anyone you put on the team anyway. Okay, moving on here, I think the Suns, let's talk about the Suns, because they're one of those teams that, was basically trapped in a corner because they had no picks of their own. They had these two players that were on no trade clauses, and they find ways to get rid of them. Bradley Beal, unfortunately, is out for the season with an injury for the Clippers right now. But they have a team now with, Devin Booker as the main guy, really the only guy, and a bunch of high-level defensive role players. And offense is, up and down with this team. But the defense was one of their biggest problems last season, and it looks so much better this year, right? They're just playing with good vibes, it seems like, right? You have, Booker, excited to play. You have Jordi Fernandez, he's impressing. Their new coach and Jordan Off are playing, is coaching well, right? And, we have to take this with a grain of salt because their schedule has been soft, and they have, mostly wins above or against sub 500 teams, and they have a brutal stretch coming up. I mean, before Christmas, what do you have? You have the Wolves, Spurs, Rockets, Kings, Thunder, Nuggets, Lakers, Warriors, all these teams before Christmas. So we could be looking at this team Christmas time, and they're 8 games below 500 because that's just how the West is right now. But at the moment, they haven't played those teams. They're playing well. Devin Booker is shining as the main role player. And I actually want to see this team keep it up because I actually think the more teams you can have, fighting it out in the West and still, in, playoff contention late into the season, not only makes games more enjoyable to watch, but it also makes, guys have to play, guys like the Thunder, players on the Thunder, players on the Nuggets, they might have to play late into the season because they don't have a seed locked up, and that can change entire playoff runs if you don't have that rest, or you are, you get banged up trying to play different games. And I'm not wishing for injuries or anything, but I just think, the more games players have to play changes an entire, playoff look like. Right? Because I think, most of us in this league, especially on the East Coast here, we don't want the Thunder to repeat. That's just the selfish, Celtics fan in me. I don't want the Thunder to repeat, obviously. I'm not saying the Celtics are anywhere close. Like, they're not. I'm not saying I want the Celtics to win. Well, obviously I want the Celtics to win, but I'm not saying, I'm rooting just for the Celtics. There are teams that I want to win in this league. I really like a team like the Rockets. I want them to win, actually, despite, KD playing for the Warriors and Ime Udoka, the situation that happened in Boston years ago. I want the Rockets to win. I really like, I like the Wolves. I really want Anthony Edwards to get a title. I think he deserves it the way he's been playing. So there are some teams that I definitely want to win. But, let's move on to some of the actual games that happened last night. And then actually back later in the show, we can continue to talk about some of the performances that just overall themes and team outlooks for this, heading into Thanksgiving here. But let's start with let's go Magic Rockets. Right, we talked about the Rockets a little bit. We talked about the Magic, the other day when the Celtics played the Magic. But, the Magic, they've been a pretty up and down season this year. The offense has not been what we expected this team to improve to with the addition of Desmond Bane, and their defense has fallen off a little bit. Right, I think they're tied with the Celtics right now for a 7-7 record. And despite this, they control most of the game here against the Rockets on Sunday night. KD just hits a clutch three, and then I think it was who was it that hit Alfred Şengün that hit the little floater to send it to overtime before the Rockets sort of close it out in overtime, right? I think when you're looking at teams like this, right, it shows the Celtics have this problem too, right? Just the talent that the shot makers, that if you have a shot maker at the end of the game can turn a game over no matter how bad or how good your defense is. KD's going to make a shot no matter which way you try and stop him. And so it just comes to that, do you have that 1A star player that can win you a game? Another interesting game here was Mavericks Blazers, right? The Mavs win in OT. There were a lot of overtime games. I know a lot of these were shadowed by some of the just fantastic games in the NFL. Let's go. My Chiefs, or not my Chiefs, my Broncos beating the Chiefs. We'll see what happens. At this point, I don't know if I'd rather, little side conversation here, but I don't know if I'd rather play the Broncos in Denver or the Chiefs at home, because I just don't trust. I just think Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs is just, you don't know what you could expect. You could get the team that's been playing for the most of the season, and you might have a chance to beat them. But if you're the Patriots, the Broncos have looked fantastic at home, and they're just, elite in the fourth quarter. But are you really taking Bo Nix over Patrick Mahomes? I just don't know. But, back to this game. Mavericks Blazers, right? Cooper Flagg, this was the stat I was going to tell you, right? He's averaging 21 and 8. In this game he had 22 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. I just think, right? We've talked about this. Flagg is not the issue. It's the Mavs roster and ownership, and you got the biggest problem out maybe in Nico Harrison. But when when it comes down to that trade for trading Luka, it really wasn't. Yes, it was his decision and his idea, but it wasn't actually his decision. It was ownership. So maybe there's an ownership problem, and if that's the problem in Dallas, which there are a lot of teams that have ownership problem, yeah, the team's not going anywhere. Because if you have teams that have ownership problems, you're not selling the team, so the teams are going nowhere. But Jazz, Bulls, two teams that, the Bulls, yes, they started strong, but I think when it's all said and done, these two teams are in the lottery chase just because they just don't have the talent. But nevertheless, you get two overtime game. Funny enough, when you get 2 overtime games, that usually means that there was just no defense. Especially when the score is 150 to 147. And when we think about two bad teams playing against each other, which is probably what the Jazz and Bulls are when it's all said and done, you usually expect low scoring, just missing shots and stuff. But players make it into the NBA because of their offense. So I think a 150 to 147 is a more likely score for a long game, because teams are not playing defense. They're just making shots, which is what any NBA player in the league can do. Keontae George did have 33 points. Does hit the game winner. Lauri Markkanen, I don't know. He started off his career well. But, it's been a really up and down season. And yes, he had, 47 points, but he had 18 misses. Kobe White returns in this game for the Bulls. I think he's been out for a while with a couple injuries. He does have 27 points, but he plays 30 minutes, which is, I guess a lot for a guy that's, on a minutes restriction, I guess. I think he went over it by a good bit. We talked about the Suns. That's another game. I guess more important, is the Hawks side of this, and we haven't talked about the Hawks. I guess maybe we should now. But they go to the West Coast and win all 4 games, which I don't know how many teams this year are going to make a West Coast trip and win every game. And yes, they played, the Jazz, the Pelicans, I think, and they're the Suns. I forget one other team they played, but I don't think it matters. I think the fact that you're able to go and win 4 West Coast games, I guess is a sign that you're a good team in this league, right? And they were down 22 points actually with, almost 10 minutes left in this game before a 43-19 comeback to win this game. And the Suns have been great, which we talked about, right? And I think, this stretch coming up for the Suns will determine their season, or I guess what the potential for the season is. But, the Suns do collapse in this game. As for the Hawks, right, they beat the Clippers, Kings, Jazz, and Suns, right? So the Clippers, Kings, and Jazz are all bottom teams in this league. And the Suns are, I guess they're not quite a bottom team, and they've been playing well, but, who knows? We don't know the full strength of this team until they go through this gauntlet of teams. And they play the Pistons next, so that'll be a big game for the Hawks. Here's an interesting question about the Hawks. They're 7-2 this season without Trae Young. Trae Young is going to be a free agent at the end of the summer. He's their defense right now is tied for 3rd in the NBA. Jalen Johnson is going nuclear, right? He had 31, 18, and 7 versus the Jazz the other day. I think he's probably the player of the week, but, whatever. Player of the week doesn't really mean anything. Caton Wallace is playing well. He's the brother of Cason Wallace over on the Oklahoma City Thunder. A physical defender. He's earned a full contract now. And this team, without Trae Young, is playing elite defensively. Which brings up the question, do you go on without him? He's not close on an extension. He's historically, that's not a great sign for a star player. Obviously, you can sign one at any time, but they're winning without him. It seems like in the last couple of years, they've been better, at least defensively without him. I don't know about the offense, but can you take the, is it possible? I don't know if you trade him because I don't know what you're going to get with him, and I don't think if you're the Hawks, you do trade him if you don't get some sort of return, because I just think talent like that, you just can't just let go because of the possibility of those star players, winning in other places and playing well in other places. But I'm wondering if you reduce his minutes, and here's the thing, I don't think you can reduce his minutes actually, because he is a star player, he is your highest paid player on the team, and he has to play, right? You can't bench a guy like that because that's just terrible for a locker room and whatever. So he's going to be playing. But secretly, I wonder if the Hawks just want to play without him because they're just playing so much better right now. I don't know where this Hawks team is going to be, at the end of the year. Yes, they've gotten talent. Kristaps Porzingis and other guys, and I thought this team was going to be one of those top teams. At least they were trying to be a top team in the East. But they're sort of mid-pack right now, and definitely playing well without Trae. So, I think this is one of the teams that you just keep an eye on along with the Suns and see what happens over the next couple weeks. All right, let's do some rapid fire here on the Kings, Knicks, and Cavs, and then I actually want to wrap it up with my 4 picks for some of the awards at the end of the season, my early predictions, my Frontrunners. All right, the Kings, they're 3-11. Steph Curry absolutely shredded them. The Spurs destroyed them without Wemby. Side comment, Wemby's out now again, 3 to 4 weeks or whatever it is with the calf strain. So the Spurs are going to go downhill for sure. We'll see how good my guy and Luke Cornett can play. But I guess that's just the thing with guys his size. Injuries are inevitable. So we'll see how the Spurs stay afloat. And I think they're going to be hard-pressed to stay at least 500. And I don't know, if he's back earlier than expected, they might still be above 500. But who knows if they're going to be playing 500 ball or not without him. I don't think this team can hold on for as long as he's out. Especially with how good the West is and how many teams you have to play, 4 or 5 times against, teams like the Thunder, teams like the Nuggets. But the Knicks, Brunson has a little bit of an ankle sprain right now. We'll see when he comes back. He missed 15 games last season with this sort of similar injury. OG Anunoby's injured right now, out for at least 2 weeks, maybe more. 5-game road trip now that they're going on. Who knows if they can stay afloat in this. These injuries are just tearing teams apart. East, West, all over the league. And it seems like each year there's more and more teams with injuries, right? Cavs are the same way. They're 9-5, but they just haven't been, impressive, right? Garland's still out. Mobley, he has okay stats, like just counting stats, but the efficiency's down, and that's really how this team goes, right? They were number 1 offensively this league last year. This year, they are not even top 10, right? Their three-point defense is bottom 5 again, right? Last year, they weren't great defensively on threes, but they could make up for it offensively. But this year, that you're not even top offensive team and your defense is struggling, I just think the reason they have they're 5 games above 500 or 4 games is just because of the teams they've been playing, right? They're 18 points for 100 possessions worse when Mitchell is off the floor, right? So whenever Donovan Mitchell is on the court, yeah, you're playing well, but that makes sense. But you're not getting anything from your bench right now, and as a result, you can't seem to, pull out these wins when Mitchell is playing on the or you can't, survive stretches when Mitchell is not playing. All right, but we're gonna wrap it up here. Last thing, the Pelicans did fire their coach and Willie Green. I'm not sure what that means. The roster is the roster. I mean, ownership roster, Zion Williams always injured. At some point, it's not really coaching fault. All right, but my 4 awards. Rookie of the Year, I got to give it to VJ Edgecombe right now for the 76ers. The 76ers have actually been a solid team, and I know they've slumped as of recently, but I just think VJ Edgecombe is filling that void that a Joel Embiid and a Paul George have provided in the past. Right? Paul George hasn't played yet. I don't even know when he's expected to return. Joel Embiid is up and down. He might have another injury now. I'm not sure. Tyrese Maxey has missed games, but VJ Edgecombe as a rookie has come in and just been an elite scorer. Defensive Player of the Year, before this injury, it was Wemby. I think, without a doubt, right? But now that he's out for 3 to 4 weeks, who knows? I don't know where, if he can play enough games to get that award. If he doesn't get it, I don't know, maybe you go to, trying to think of, my guy Jordan Walsh over here on the Celtics is looking pretty good. But he doesn't have the stats or the games to make that work right now. All right, but Coach of the Year, it has to be J.B. Bickerstaff with the Pistons, right? Just the way he's, making this team, even with Cade Cunningham, this team is a top 2 team in the league right now. And they've only lost 2 games. All right, and MVP, I said Kevin Durant, but I just think the pure numbers of Luka Doncic right now for the Lakers without LeBron, and LeBron's going to come back this week at some point, maybe tomorrow night. But just the pure stats from Luka Doncic, make him my MVP. Wow. But that was a lot of stuff we talked about today. I'm going to thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave your comments in the chat right now or after the show. That really is appreciated. Share this video with others. We'll be back tomorrow night, back with Celtics content, post-game show as the Celtics take on the Nets, where, they should win. If they don't win, that is a problem, a big problem for this team right now. Right, the Nets are, what are they, 1-13 or something like that? And then, we probably won't have anything in between, but Friday is an NBA Cup game. I haven't quite decided yet. I actually might stream the game, play-by-play on YouTube here. So I'll keep you guys updated. You can check out Instagram for updates on maybe whether I'll do that or not. I'll post a link in my story and whatever if I decide to go live for that. But obviously, no matter what, we will still have the post-game show after the game. And then, I don't know, into Thanksgiving week, I know I'm going to the game against the Magic on Sunday, I believe that is. And I don't know my schedule for the rest of the week, as I am, traveling for the holiday. But I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, go Celtics. Let me pick two other teams. Go Rockets. I like the Pistons. I'm gonna support the Pistons. Any team but the Lakers, the Thunder, the Warriors right now. I want those teams going down into the dump. But yeah, signing off.